A popular motto in modern self-improvement circles is that we must all suffer one of two things: the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. And there's a reason for it. Whether or not we think of it consciously, our actions inevitably express which of the two pains we are bound to endure. Most of us, after given enough thought, would almost certainly be willing to endure disciplinary pain over the self-inflicted sorrow created by missing out on what could have been. But do we live that way? For the majority of us, the answer to that question, if we're honest, is not really, at least not enough. And this seemingly obvious incongruity reveals just how unconsciously we live our lives. In choosing to live our lives, prioritizing ephemeral desire over discipline and pleasure over principles, while simultaneously seeking lofty objectives, we make ourselves walking contradictions. We can't proclaim with our words that we consider long-term good over short-term pleasure, and yet perpetually live out patterns of behavior that completely reverses that order of priority. Most know and often dream about what the good or ideal life looks like, but the lives many of us are living currently just don't seem to match up. It is a great thing, a blessing even, to be enamored with objectives, potential achievements, and projections of who we could be. But it means nothing if we spend the slice of life we inhabit right now towards things that don't lead us there, and in some cases, even push us further away. We can't just allow that to be the defining pattern of our existence, not when life is this short. Many people, myself included, forget or overlook that. And this isn't surprising in the slightest. Why? Because it's hard, because the alternatives are easier, and because so many people today are allured by the idea of discipline, but crumble quickly when it is no longer a proposition to accept, but a reality to experience. It's one thing to work hard when it's something you love, but to be able to work at something you don't like, as if you love it, is a whole other dimension. And what makes that possible is the decision, day in and day out, to focus not on the love you lack towards the work you're doing, but the love you should have towards the person you're becoming. A person shaped by the ideal that awaits the end of the hero's journey, the end of your journey. That ideal is like a star which shines brightly and moves along with you, but you never reach it because the journey doesn't actually have an end. The more you move in its direction, the more it recedes away. Well, what's the point then, if it can never be attained, one may ask. The point is that in moving endlessly towards something you can never reach, you'll find yourself moving further than you would have ever gone. If you could just discipline your desire enough to focus as much as you can on that star, any desert becomes bearable. Indeed, there will be an uncountable number of unavoidably hard days or moments where discipline is the only bridge connecting you to the ideal waiting at the other side of the chasm. The decision is up to you as to whether you'll walk it or if you'll instead stay comfortably where you are, comfortably as you are. If there's vitality to any of the aspirations you have, you must feel uncomfortable with that comfortability. Stay too secure, fixed to the feeling of ease, and you may find yourself in the horror of missing out on the adventure of a lifetime. To have grand aspirations and to take your first step into the ocean of uncertainty and hardship to make them real is a hell of a risk. There's no denying that. But there is no adventure without risk, because risks bring forth what is unfamiliar, and what is unfamiliar is exciting. Indeed, the unfamiliar brings with it hazards that will come your way and waters that will test you, but your world has to have a dragon to fight, or else it wouldn't have a St. George. Rarely, if ever, do people contemplate seriously the implication of what this means, of what would happen if you lived your life staked on the disciplining of desire towards the achievement of the good. of what we would become if we would just stop making the continual and universal mistake of sacrificing our future ideals and the adventures involved in pursuing them in exchange for immediate comfort, ease, and as others call it, cheap dopamine. A currency which adds nothing to our lives and often takes away life instead. It is just a fact that most of us, including I, are or have been slaves to this mentality to one degree or another, and what makes it truly sad is that it keeps us complacent with a state of just existing, floating from one place to another endlessly with goals that are never reached and dreams that are never realized. That, as Marcus Aurelius said in his Meditations, should be the greatest object of our fear, not death, but the possibility of never beginning to live. And that is the outcome we ensure when we continually prioritize our vicinity to a reward over the value of the reward itself. The best rewards are often the ones furthest away, and that is precisely why most hesitate to take a step in its direction, because we are content with the little pithy and soul-destroying ones that are accessible next door: alcohol, porn, drugs, binging, etc. This problem of perception and reward plagues all human beings. We tend naturally to be quite poor at playing the long game and striving towards a larger reward that's awaiting us at the end of a long, arduous hunt. Rather, we choose the small reward if it means we receive it immediately and sacrifice little in attaining it. The allure of instant gratification, as it's called, was at one point advantageous in the world of our ancestors, where urgency, uncertainty, and survival were commonplace, but is a dangerous game in the world we now inhabit. Unlike our ancestors, we live in a world where the majority of us have access to everything we need, and for a good many, even the things we want. There lies the problem. Times have changed, but we as a collective have not at least as much as we should. We continue to, and increasingly, pride ourselves on self-indulgence over self-control, pleasure over moral purpose, and the overturning of institutions that have acted as necessary disciplinary measures that have mitigated our inclination towards the pursuit of vices. Gluttony, alcoholism, substance abuse, porn addiction, and the rest of the spectrum of increasingly pervasive and destructive patterns of behavior are being fed by a society that not only fails to set limitations, but is complacent with its citizens maintaining primal attitudes towards consumption, attitudes that are not fit for modern humans. And there appears to be a common thread that characterizes all these patterns, and that is a lack of vision, a lack of an ideal to pursue, and a thoroughly blank picture of what to become. This is due in part to the rejection of religious narratives to provide a basis for moral obligations, but also because of how increasingly uncontemplative and unthoughtful we've become. And that's the part I want to focus on. If you contemplated who you could become, you would realize that ahead of you is the greatest adventure of your life. It is one of the great gifts of our existence, to improve in the midst of hurdles, to purposefully strive ever upwards, even when there are forces intent on pushing you down. The indomitable human spirit, as some put it. In it lies the incredible opportunity to be possessed by a spirit that extracts our potential and makes an artwork out of it. Yet sadly, many people miss that. People have, in other words, become blind to the magic of possibility and potential inherent in us. If you live a life composed of actions that are directed towards a healthy ideal, you can't comprehend what you could accomplish. It's not about getting things perfect all the time, which is impossible. It's about pointing your life in the right direction. And whenever you inevitably point yourself in the wrong one, you stand up, wipe the dust off your shoulders, and reorient yourself back to where you should be, dead to the failures of the past and anxieties of the future, and instead focused on doing the best you can in the present, for that is all you can do, and nothing more should be expected. Now, as far as practicality is concerned, finding this direction is not exactly something you can do instantly. It takes time, effort, and intentionality, and you can do this by allotting time in any given day, 10 minutes, 1 hour, or even multiple hours, towards writing down and literally visualizing what your ideal self would look like. And no, not a version of yourself characterized by childish inclinations that manifests in merely wanting mansions, 18 supermodels in your house, and 14 Rolexes, but a version of yourself characterized by a success founded not on hedonism, but excellence. And that includes moral excellence too, because your character is just as valuable as your possessions, even more actually. Here's a hypothetical list of factors you may want to consider. 1. How would you look like financially if all things went well? 2. What would you look like in relation to family and parenthood? In other words, what type of father or mother would you want your children to see and be raised by? 3. How would you look like physically as it pertains to fitness and physical well-being? 4. How would you look like character-wise? Will that person be confident, admirable, have incredible discipline and self-control? Will that person be respectful, kind, charitable, forgiving, etc.? 5. On an ideal day of productivity, what would that person be doing? 6. What underlying principles does that person live by? These are just a few examples to get you started, but there are obviously many more you can add. And remember, genuinely visualize yourself as you're answering these questions, as it'll leave a greater impression on you and has the added effect of compelling you even more to become them, because they are not just some abstract fantasy characters, they are projections of your untapped potential. In the end, it's ultimately up to you whether or not you want to make them real. But for your sake, and for the sake of a world that is in dire need of it, please do.